Let's get down to some cases where we can apply these principles. The one that is on everyone's lips, already been brought up, is Uber. Now, Brad, you were working for Uber in 2015 when Mayor de Blasio decided to side with the beleaguered taxi drivers and basically put Uber's business model out of practice. And how did you win that fight?
It was pretty fun. So, you know, there's a saying that you can't fight City Hall, and we did, and we basically just ran a vicious fucking campaign, and just...
What a great logo, can't fight City Hall with a no through it.
Yeah, and what we did essentially was we ran it from de Blasio's left. So de Blasio, for those of you who pay attention to local politics, fashions himself as a sort of champion of the oppressed, and he's the hero puts against inequality and things like that, which are good things to be. But what he didn't understand about Uber was all he saw was the big valuation and the Suburbans lined up on Park Avenue, but all of our drivers tend to be immigrants and lower income people who are trying to make a living. And taxi especially is an industry with a really nasty history of racism. And if you ask any person of color in this city, have you ever raised your hand for a taxi that's been available and they've gone by you? The answer is always yes. And so we basically ran a campaign where we featured real drivers and real passengers and lots of TV ads and lots of different ways that we were kind of getting the public's attention to say, it is racist and discriminatory to crack down on Uber and not allow ride sharing. And all of a sudden it became the anti-progressive thing as opposed to the progressive thing. And slowly we picked off council member after council member. And then eventually we just kind of kept beating them up so badly that they called one day and said, okay, we want to meet. And I said, not unless you're going to drop the bill. There's nothing to talk about. And they said, you'll be happy. Don't worry about it. So we spent the morning kind of thinking like, okay, what can we concede in this? Because it's a negotiation. They've got to give, we've got to give. And we walk into the meeting and they say, we'll drop the bill. And we said, okay, what do you want? They said, will you take down the TV ads? I'm like, yeah, why would I spend $2 million a week on TV ads if I don't need it? And I said, what else? They said, that's it. And I said, it's just the ads? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, okay, done. And bill got dropped that day.
Right. Evan, you say in your book, though, that while Uber's been undeniably successful, a lot of people take away the wrong lesson from the success of Uber.
Yeah, look, I think, like, if you read the introduction to Bradley's book, you're going to understand that Bradley enjoys the fight, right? Like, it's woven through there. And one of the broader sort of points that I make in my book is, like, sometimes you have to fight, but an awful lot of problems can be resolved by understanding how to have the right conversation in the right way, by crafting your brand in a thoughtful way, by engaging things. And sort of my approach to this is almost more fight when you have to fight, but figure out how to not fight if you can. And I think I remember a really prominent VC in the Valley explaining to me, probably 5 years ago, like in the middle of all of, while Bradley was literally figuring out how to fight these fights on the ground with Uber, explaining to me, back to your point about VCs, he goes, oh, well, you know, we're fine. Uber has proved if you raise enough capital, you can just squash government and you don't have to deal with this stuff, right? It's fine, like we don't really have to deal with regulatory risk because we can just outfund it. And I think the problem is, like, to the extent that a lot of VCs pay attention to what Uber did, they just take that lesson of, oh, you can spend your way through this problem, or even better, hey, it's fine because our users will rise up and be our citizen army to topple City Hall for us if it becomes a problem. And in fact, when you look at it, Uber really had a very, very unique set of strategic attributes that sort of drove that strategy, right? And so it's very rare that you have one centralized competitor, Uber, that's actually facing a really fragmented set of competitors in that case. Like, and you were fighting the fights, I was observing it, but like, it seemed like each taxi cab commission in each city was 2 beats slower than you guys were in figuring out how to respond. Like, you guys were perfecting your playbook faster than they were figuring out the playbook.
Well, not only that, but their playbook was so consistent that at first we found, we're like, you know what, maybe they're like all colluding. Oh, that would be an antitrust violation. So we hired David Boies to investigate the taxi and the commissions to basically see if they were colluding from market jurisdiction. And he came back and said, they're not sophisticated enough to do that. But look, I mean, Evan's point is absolutely right in twofold. One is, in terms of the customers rising up, It only really works in unique circumstances where A, people are really motivated about this product, and B, they are local voters. If you take Airbnb, which is a great startup and incredibly successful, they have failed miserably at trying to use their customers to fight against bad regulation, because by definition, all of the scale in Airbnb is on the guest side. And if you're a guest somewhere, you're not a registered voter there. And so if, you know, some guy who has a nice stay at an Airbnb in Bushwick from Stockholm, then emails the state senator from Bushwick and says, yeah, don't leave Airbnb alone. That guy doesn't care. It's like, you can vote in my district. It's irrelevant, right? So you need a very specific set of circumstances. And also, you've just got to really understand that each jurisdiction is really unique. So, like, for example, we're investors and work with a startup called Bird, which is an electric scooter company. And we have different strategies in every single market in the U.S. Sometimes we ask for permissions. Like right now, we've got legislation pending in the New York City Council, same thing in Chicago, Philly, Seattle, to legalize this because we don't think there's any other way to do it. There are lots of other markets where we looked at the law and said, nothing says that we can't launch here. And so we did. Still had things to deal with on the back end, and sometimes I've hurt feelings from regulators. But even with one company, from market to market, even within the same country, you deploy different strategies.